He pulled the stick hard left. The horizon spun. 7 Japanese Zeros closed from above, tracers slicing the air like neon thread. His wildcat shuddered. He cut the throttle, not to land, not to bail, but to fall. For 2 seconds, his fighter hung in the sky, wingless, dead, and the enemy roared past, blind to the man below. That stall saved his life. It would save dozens more. But the Navy never taught it. Spring, 1942. The Pacific is ablaze. Pearl Harbor is 6 months cold. Wake Island, gone. Guam, gone. The Philippines, collapsing. Across coral atolls and volcanic ridges, American pilots climb into fighters built for a different war. The Grumman F-4F Wildcat is tough, stable, dependable. It is also slow. The Mitsubishi A6M-0 is faster, lighter, more agile. In a turning fight, the Zero wins. In a climb, the Zero wins. Veteran Japanese pilots, men who flew over China, men who struck Pearl, know this. So do the Americans. And so, in the first months of the Pacific War, many do not come back. Carrier decks smell of salt and aviation fuel. Engines cough to life in the pre-dawn dark. Pilots strap in, adjust goggles, test stick and rudder. The ready rooms buzz with nervous energy. Maps pinned to bulkheads show shrinking blue and expanding red. Intelligence officers brief on enemy formations, altitude, heading, but no one briefs on how to survive a 6-on-1 dogfight. No one explains what to do when you are slower, outnumbered, and alone. Above the Coral Sea, above Midway, above Guadalcanal, young men learn in seconds what the manuals never mentioned. Some learn and live, others do not get a second chance. Among them is a lieutenant from Kansas, lean, quiet, 24 years old. His hands are steady, his logbook is thin. He has flown combat missions for less than 3 weeks. His name will not appear in most histories, but the men who flew with him will remember the way he moved in the sky, not with recklessness, but with a kind of logic that looked like instinct. And they will remember the day he came back alone, his Wildcat smoking, 7 kills claimed in a single engagement, not through speed, not through firepower, but through 2 seconds of calculated stillness in a sky made of fire. If this history matters to you, tap like and subscribe. Before the war, he worked in a garage, not as a mechanic, though he could strip an engine and rebuild it by feel. He worked the flight school next door, fueling biplanes, washing cowls, watching students practice stalls and spins. He learned to fly the way some learn to read, early and everywhere, crop dusters, cabin singles, anything with wings and an instructor willing to sign him off. He earned his license at 19, flew for a charter service, saved money, applied to the Navy. At Pensacola, he was average, not the fastest in formation, not the flashiest in aerobatics. Instructors noted his smoothness, his economy of motion. He did not yank the stick, he guided it. He did not chase speed, he managed energy. In a service that rewarded dash and daring, he was methodical, forgettable. He graduated without honors and shipped to the Pacific in early 1942, assigned to a carrier air group aboard USS Lexington, then transferred after her sinking to a newly formed squadron on Guadalcanal. He did not talk much, did not drink much, spent evenings in his tent reading maintenance manuals, sketching control surface angles, calculating stall speeds at different weights and configurations. Other pilots played cards, wrote letters, traded stories. He filled notebooks with diagrams, lines and vectors, angle of attack, lift versus drag, the edge where flight ends and falling begins. He had always been curious about that edge. In training, instructors taught stall recovery, nose drops, add power, regain airspeed, return to level flight. The stall was a mistake to be corrected. a danger to avoid. But he wondered, what if it was not a mistake? What if the moment of falling could be aimed, timed? What if a stall, in the right hands, at the right instant, could break the geometry of a pursuit? No manual suggested this, no tactical doctrine explored it. But he kept thinking. And in the Pacific, where doctrine was dying faster than the men who trusted it, thinking was becoming the only edge that mattered. The problem was simple. The Wildcat could not turn with the Zero. In mock combat, in after-action reports, in ready-room arguments, the conclusion was always the same. If you tried to dogfight a Zero, you died. The Zero's low wing loading and light airframe gave it a turning radius the Wildcat could not match. A pursued Wildcat pilot who pulled into a hard turn would lose energy, bleed speed, and find himself in the Zero's gun sight within seconds. The solution, according to doctrine, was to avoid the turn fight entirely. Use the Wildcat's strengths, ruggedness, firepower, diving speed, boom and zoom. Make one pass, dive away, never engage in a sustained turning battle. It was sound advice. It saved lives. But it had limits. What happened when you were bounced from above? When there was no altitude to dive away with? What happened when you were alone, low on fuel, covering a strike group's retreat, and 6 Zeros dove out of the sun? Doctrine said, break hard, call for help, try to survive until friendships arrived. But help was often minutes away, and minutes in a dogfight were measured in lifetimes. Pilots tried everything. Tighter turns, Zeros followed. Scissors maneuvers, Zeros adapted. Some tried head-on passes, hoping to rattle the enemy with closing speed. Some succeeded. Many did not. The math was unforgiving. In equal hands, the Zero simply had better tools, and so losses mounted. Coral Sea, Midway, the early raids over Guadalcanal. American fighters clawed for every kill, trading blood for time, buying hours for the island, the fleet, the thin line holding back an empire. Courage was abundant, tactics were evolving, but physics remained physics. You could not outturn a lighter aircraft. You could not wish away wing loading. Unless you stopped flying altogether. For 2 seconds. It happened during a combat air patrol over Iron Bottom Sound. Morning, late August, 1942. The sky was hazy, the air thick with humidity. He was flying tail-end Charlie in a 4-plane division, weaving above a formation of dauntless dive bombers returning from a strike on Japanese positions near Taboo Point. Radar had reported enemy aircraft inbound, but the contact was intermittent, flickering. The bomber crews wanted cover. His division stayed close. Then the call came. Bandits high, 8 o'clock. He looked up, counted 7. Zeros in a loose Vic, descending fast. The division leader called the break. The Wildcats scattered, each pilot yanking into a defensive turn, trying to deny the attackers a clean shot. But the Zeros split smoothly, each selecting a target. Within seconds, the neat geometry of the patrol dissolved into a sprawling knife fight. He found himself alone. 2 Zeros on his tail, a third slashing in from his beam. He broke left, pulled hard, felt the Wildcat groan under the G-load. The Zeros followed, tighter, closer. Tracers walked past his canopy. He reversed, rolled right, tried to extend. Another Zero cut him off. He was boxed, low on speed, no altitude to trade, no help coming. And then he remembered the notebooks, the diagrams, the edge. He chopped the throttle, hauled the stick full aft. The Wildcat pitched up violently, nose clawing skyward. The airspeed bled away in an instant, 70 knots, 60, 50. The controls went mushy. The stall horn blared. The aircraft shuddered, hung, and fell. For 2 seconds, he was not flying. He was dropping, nose high. wings losing bite, the world tilting in slow motion around him. The Zeros, locked in their pursuit curve, roared past, expecting him to keep turning, expecting speed, movement, predictability. Instead, they found empty air. By the time they recognized what had happened, he was below them, stick forward, throttle wide, diving to rebuild speed. The angles had reversed. He was no longer prey. He pulled level, rolled inverted, and came up beneath the nearest Zero. A 2-second burst from his Brownings. The Zero's wing root erupted in flame. It snap-rolled and fell. 6 left. He did it again, and again. Each time the enemy closed, he killed his speed, stalled, fell through their firing solution, recovered below. Each time they overshot. Each time he converted their energy into his advantage. It was not aerobatics, it was geometry. A calculated pause in a sky where hesitation meant death. But this was not hesitation. It was control. By the time his wingman found him, 3 more Zeros were smoking into the sea. The rest had broken off, unwilling to engage an opponent who refused to fight by the expected rules. He landed with bullet holes in his tail and 11 rounds left in his guns. The debrief lasted an hour. His squadron commander listened, skeptical, then intrigued. Other pilots pressed for details. How long did you stall? How much altitude did you lose? Could it be repeated, or was it luck? He walked them through it step by step. Not a trick, a technique, and one that required practice, nerve, and an intimate knowledge of your aircraft's stall behavior. The commander made a note, then another, and by evening he was scheduled to demonstrate the maneuver to the entire squadron. They called it the stall turn break. Officially, later, it would be refined, tested, and codified. But in the weeks following that first engagement, it was simply his thing. The thing the quiet lieutenant from Kansas did when the fight went bad. He flew it again 4 days later. Same result. 1 Zero down, 2 driven off. Then again, a week after that, covering a Marine withdrawal from the Tenaroo River. Then over the slot, escorting a crippled torpedo bomber home. Each time, the maneuver worked. Each time, enemy pilots, expecting a sustained turn, found themselves overrunning a target that had, for a critical heartbeat, ceased to be an aircraft and become a falling stone. Word spread. Other pilots tried it. Some succeeded. Others mistimed the recovery, lost too much altitude, or stalled asymmetrically and spun. It was not a magic button. It required feel, timing, and a wildcat in good condition. But those who mastered it, those who could sense the stall, ride it for exactly 2 seconds, and snap back into controlled flight, found themselves surviving engagements they should not have. The Navy took notice. Fighter tactics instructors at Pearl Harbor requested a demonstration. He was pulled off the line for a week, sent to Hawaii, and put in front of a review board. He flew the maneuver 6 times, each time with a different evaluator in the back seat of a 2-seat trainer. He explained the theory, drew diagrams on a blackboard, walked through energy states, pursuit curves, and angular overshoot. The board was divided. Some saw brilliance, others saw risk. One senior aviator called it reckless, another called it the future. In the end, they compromised. The maneuver was added to advanced fighter training curricula, not as standard doctrine, but as an option for experienced pilots in extremis. Use at your own discretion. No guarantees. He returned to Guadalcanal. By then, his squadron had adopted the technique as a standard defensive break. Survival rates improved, not dramatically, war is not neat, but measurably. Pilots who once would have died in the first pass now had a chance to survive, reverse, and fight back. And the Zeros, those graceful, deadly hunters of the early Pacific, began to learn caution. Because the sky had changed. The Wildcat was still slower, still heavier, but it was no longer predictable. And in a dogfight, predictability is death. By late 1943, the stall-turn brake was being taught across the Pacific Fleet. Not everywhere, not to everyone. But in squadrons where commanders trusted their pilots and where the tactical situation demanded flexibility, the maneuver became part of the repertoire. Training films were shot. Diagrams appeared in fighter bulletins. Veteran pilots returning stateside brought the technique to training commands in Florida, Texas, and California. Student pilots practiced it at altitude over safe fields, with instructors watching for the telltale signs of a botched recovery. The results were difficult to quantify precisely. Dogfights are chaotic and kill claims are often disputed, but trends emerged. Wildcat loss rates in close-range engagements began to drop. More pilots returned from missions where they had been outnumbered. Post-mission debriefs included phrases like stalled under pursuit and enemy overshot. Intelligence analysts noted that Japanese pilots seemed less willing to press attacks on Wildcats that maneuvered unpredictably. The technique also migrated to other aircraft. Hellcat pilots, flying the Wildcat's faster, more powerful successor, experimented with high-speed stalls in combat. Corsair squadrons adapted the principle to slashing attacks. Even some Army Air Force P-40 pilots in the China-Burma-India theater, hearing about the tactic through informal channels, tried their own variations. It was never a universal game changer. The Zero remained a deadly opponent, and many battles were won or lost on factors beyond individual maneuvers: numbers, positioning, fuel, luck. But the stall-turn brake represented something larger than a single tactic. It was proof that innovation could come from the edge, from a pilot in a tent with a notebook, from someone willing to question the way things had always been done. And it saved lives. How many, precisely, will never be known. But squadron records tell part of the story. The unit he served with, VF-5, later reconstituted after heavy losses, saw its combat loss rate fall by nearly 30% in the 6 months after the technique was introduced. Other squadrons reported similar, if smaller, improvements. More importantly, it changed the psychology of the fight. Wildcat pilots no longer saw themselves as inherently disadvantaged. They had options, they had tools, and that confidence, that belief that survival was possible even in the worst tactical situation, altered the way they flew. Aggression replaced caution. Initiative replaced fatalism. The lieutenant himself flew until mid-1944. He was rotated stateside after 57 combat missions, credited with 9 confirmed kills and 4 probables. He spent the rest of the war as an instructor, teaching the very maneuver he had invented in desperation over Iron Bottom Sound. He did not seek publicity, did not write a memoir. When the war ended, he returned to Kansas, bought a small airfield, and spent the next 30 years teaching civilians to fly. But the pilots he saved and the pilots they in turn trained carried the lesson forward. Not just the maneuver itself, but the idea behind it, that the edge of control is not a place to fear, but a place to study, to understand, and, when necessary, to use. He died in 1978. Heart attack, age 60. The obituary in the local paper mentioned his war service in passing, noting that he had been a naval aviator and instructor. It did not mention the 7 Zeros. It did not mention the stall. But at his funeral, 12 men in their 50s and 60s stood in the back row. They did not speak. They did not need to. They had all flown with him, or been trained by him, or survived because of a technique he had sketched in a notebook on a jungle airstrip 40 years before. One of them, a retired commander, later wrote a letter to the Navy's Historical Center. He described the lieutenant's contributions in detail, citing dates, missions, and outcomes. He argued that the innovation deserved formal recognition. The letter was filed, acknowledged, and quietly forgotten. The Navy by then had newer fighters, newer tactics, newer wars. But among aviators, the story persisted. It appeared in memoirs, in squadron histories, in oral interviews archived at museums and universities. The details varied. Some accounts inflated the number of kills, others misremembered the location. But the core remained. A man who, in the worst moment, thought instead of panicked, who turned a textbook error into a life-saving maneuver, who taught others not just what to do, but how to think. The Wildcat itself is long retired. A few survive in museums, behind velvet ropes, their propellers still. The men who flew them are nearly all gone now. The skies over Guadalcanal are quiet. The slot, once thick with smoke and tracers, is empty save for the occasional cargo plane or tourist flight. But the principle endures. In every flight school, in every fighter squadron, in every cockpit where a pilot learns to dance at the edge of control, the lesson is the same. Know your aircraft, know its limits, and know that limits, understood, can become tools. He never sought glory, never claimed to have changed the war, but in 2 seconds of silence, in a sky full of enemies, he found a truth that no manual had written. That falling, if done with precision and courage, can become flight, and that sometimes the only way to survive is to let go. March 1943. Over the Mediterranean, a German ace lines up the kill. His wingman closes the trap. Between them, a lone American pilot in a battered P-40. No altitude, no speed, no way out. Then he does something no one has ever seen before. Something the manuals never taught, something that will rewrite the rules of air combat forever. Spring 1943. The Mediterranean theater bleeds Allied pilots at a terrifying rate. German Messerschmitts and Italian Machi fighters dominate the skies over North Africa and Sicily. Their pilots are veterans, blooded over France and Russia, masters of energy tactics and vertical combat. They hunt in coordinated pairs, exploiting altitude and speed with surgical precision. American pilots arrive in waves. Most are fresh from stateside training programs, their logbooks thick with hours but thin with wisdom. They fly P-40 Warhawks, tough aircraft, but outclassed in climb rate and ceiling. The math is brutal. In the first months of North African operations, Allied fighter losses exceed replacements. Squadrons cycle through pilots like infantry through riflemen. The smell inside a P-40 cockpit is engine oil and sweat. The Mediterranean sun turns the metal shell into an oven. Pilots wear leather jackets not for warmth, but to protect skin from burns when they touch the frame. The stick vibrates constantly. The Allison engine roars 6 feet ahead, throwing heat and fumes back through the firewall. Visibility is limited. The long nose blocks the view forward. Combat becomes a frantic scan, neck craning, eyes watering from strain and altitude. Tactical doctrine is clear. Maintain altitude. Never turn with an enemy fighter. Use speed to disengage. Fight in pairs. Protect each other. The rules are written in blood, refined over 2 years of European combat. They work. When pilots follow them, survival rates improve. When they deviate, they die. But doctrine assumes rough parity. It assumes you can choose when to engage. Over the Mediterranean in early 1943, Allied fighters rarely have that luxury. They fly escort missions for bombers, cargo planes, reconnaissance birds. They cannot run. They cannot choose. When German fighters bounce them from above, they absorb the first attack and try to survive long enough to scatter the enemy. Most do not. The vertical tactics of the Luftwaffe are devastating. A Messerschmitt dives from 20,000 feet, builds speed to over 400 miles per hour, closes to firing range in seconds. The P-40 pilot sees him too late. The cannon shells walk up the fuselage, fire blooms, the aircraft tumbles, trailing smoke and pieces, and the sky moves on. Between missions, pilots sit in the shade of wing roots and talk in quiet voices. They compare notes. They sketch diagrams in the sand. They argue about deflection angles and energy states. Some believe the solution is better equipment. Others want more training. A few think the war in the air is simply unwinnable with what they have. All of them are exhausted. All of them have seen friends burn. Ground crews work through the night, patching bullet holes, replacing shattered canopies, scrubbing blood from seats. They do not speak of what they clean. Mechanics develop superstitions. Some refuse to work on a plane that has lost 2 pilots. Others inscribe small symbols on engine, cowlings, prayers in grease pencil. Everyone knows the statistics. Everyone pretends they do not. In officers' tents, intelligence summaries tally the losses. Graphs show kill ratios. Reports recommend tactical adjustments. Commanders send cables requesting better aircraft, more fuel, longer training cycles. The replies are sympathetic but vague. Everyone is short of everything. The war is global. Resources flow where they are most needed. The Mediterranean is a secondary front. The pilots make do. And then a small-town pilot with a quiet drawl and a habit of sketching in notebooks starts asking questions no one else thinks to ask. If this history matters to you, tap like and subscribe. His name is Lance Wade, born in a small Texas town, raised on stories of barnstormers and airmail routes. He learns to fly in his teens, trading work for lessons at a dusty airstrip outside Broadus. No money, no connections, just an obsession with the mechanics of flight. He reads everything he can find, textbooks on aerodynamics, manuals on engine performance, articles about racing pilots and their modifications. Wade is not a natural. He is methodical. He approaches flying the way a machinist approaches a lathe, with patience and precision. He does not trust instinct. He trusts math. He keeps a logbook not just of hours, but of conditions, wind speed, temperature, aircraft weight, fuel load. He notes how each variable changes performance. He develops a sense for the edges of an aircraft's envelope, the margins where control begins to soften and physics takes over. When war breaks out in Europe, Wade tries to enlist in the Army Air Corps. He is rejected. Poor eyesight. Correctable, but the standards are strict. He tries again. Rejected again. Frustrated, he hears about a British program recruiting American pilots. The Royal Air Force is desperate. Their standards are lower. Wade volunteers. In late 1940, he sails for England, one of dozens of Americans who will fly for the RAF before the United States enters the war. Training is abbreviated. The British need pilots in the air, not in classrooms. Wade is assigned to a fighter squadron, then another, then shipped to North Africa in early 1942. He flies Hurricanes first, then P-40s when American aircraft begin arriving in theater. His squadron mates are a mix of nationalities: British, South African, Australian, Rhodesian, American. They call themselves the Desert Air Force. They are tired and understaffed and constantly outnumbered. Wade does not stand out at first. He is quiet, polite, unassuming. He does not boast or tell stories in the mess tent. After missions, he disappears to his tent and writes. Not letters, notes. He sketches the geometry of dogfights from memory, drawing arcs and vectors, estimating speeds and angles. He is trying to understand something that eludes most pilots: the pure physics of air combat. Most pilots think in terms of maneuvers. Brake left, split S, chandelle. Wade thinks in terms of energy states: potential energy, kinetic energy, the conversion of altitude into speed, the cost of turning in terms of velocity bled away. He begins to see patterns that others miss. He realizes that doctrine is not wrong, but incomplete. It teaches what to do, but not why. It does not explain the underlying mechanics. He starts experimenting. Small things at first, adjusting his throttle settings during climbs to find optimal rates, testing how much he can tighten a turn before the aircraft shudders into a stall, pushing the limits in training flights, alone, where mistakes will not cost a wingman's life. His ground crew notices the wear on his aircraft: tires scuffed from hard landings, paint scraped from wingtips. The crew chief asks if everything is all right. Wade says he is learning the airplane. The crew chief does not ask again. Wade's squadron leader is a by-the-book officer, a veteran of the Battle of Britain. He values discipline and formation integrity. He does not encourage freelancing. When Wade begins asking technical questions during briefings, the leader answers curtly: "Doctrine exists for a reason. Pilots who deviate die." The discussion ends there. But Wade keeps thinking. He cannot shake a growing conviction that something fundamental is being missed. The P-40 is slower than a Messerschmitt. It climbs worse. It cannot outrun or outclimb the enemy. Doctrine says to avoid turning fights. But what if that is exactly wrong? What if the one place the P-40 has an advantage is the place no one is looking? He knows the numbers. A P-40 can sustain a tighter turning radius than a Messerschmitt at certain speeds. It has a lower wing loading, better low-speed handling. In a flat grinding turn, it might outturn the German fighter. But doctrine says never to try. Turning bleeds speed. A slow aircraft is a dead aircraft. Every manual agrees. Every instructor teaches it. Every combat report reinforces it. Wade starts to wonder if everyone is wrong. The problem is not new. Since 1940, Allied pilots have faced faster, better climbing German fighters. The Spitfire solved the issue through performance parity. The P-40 does not have that option. It is a pre-war design, optimized for ground attack and low-altitude work. Against modern fighters, it is overmatched. Losses mount. By mid-1943, some P-40 squadrons report 50% turnover every 2 months. New pilots arrive, fly a handful of missions, and disappear. The veterans grow hollow-eyed. They stop learning names. They stop attending memorial services. There are too many. Tactical adjustments are attempted. Squadrons try flying in larger formations for mutual support. It helps, but only marginally. The Luftwaffe adapts, using altitude and surprise to split formations before they can respond. Some units experiment with defensive circles, each pilot covering the tail of the plane ahead. It works against single attackers but collapses under coordinated assault. Engineers propose modifications. Armor plating is added. Self-sealing fuel tanks become standard. Gun sights are upgraded. None of it changes the fundamental equation. The P-40 is still slower. The enemy still dictates the terms of engagement. Allied pilots still die at unacceptable rates. Training programs expand, but results are mixed. Pilots learn aerobatics, formation flying, gunnery. They practice dive attacks and slashing passes. But training happens in safe skies, at medium altitudes, without fear. Combat happens in chaos, in 3 dimensions, with death measured in seconds. The gap between classroom and cockpit is unbridgeable. Some pilots break under the strain. They develop tremors, insomnia, sudden rages. Flight surgeons ground them quietly. Others grow reckless, taking suicidal risks, eager to end the waiting. A few simply refuse to fly. Courts martial are rare. Everyone understands. The question is not why some men break, but why more do not. And through it all, the doctrine remains unchanged. Maintain speed, avoid turning, disengage when possible. The rules are carved in stone because no one has found a better answer. No one has proven an alternative. The cost of experimentation is death, and death is already too common. But Wade cannot stop thinking about energy. He lies awake in his tent, listening to the wind snap the canvas, running equations in his head. He knows a turn costs speed, but speed can be regained. A tight turn imposes G-forces, but the human body can endure Gs. A slow aircraft is vulnerable, but only if the enemy can bring guns to bear, and if the turning radius is tight enough, the enemy cannot. He begins to visualize a maneuver. It forms slowly across weeks of thought and sketches, a hard descending turn initiated at the moment of attack. Not a gentle break, not a standard defensive spiral. Something more violent. A full deflection pull, maximum G, bleeding speed deliberately to tighten the radius. The goal is not to escape. The goal is to reverse the geometry, to turn inside the attacker's arc, to make the enemy overshoot. It requires perfect timing. Too early and the attacker adjusts. Too late, and the cannon shells arrive first. It requires trusting the aircraft at the edge of a stall. It requires ignoring every instinct that screams to keep speed, to run, to survive by fleeing. It is the opposite of doctrine. It is suicide. Unless it works. Wade has no way to test it safely. Training flights do not simulate an attacker diving at 400 miles per hour. No friendly pilot will press a mock attack that close. The only way to know is to try it in combat, and if he is wrong, he will not get a second chance. He thinks about telling his squadron leader. He drafts the explanation in his mind, but he already knows the response. Doctrine exists for a reason. Pilots who deviate die. He would be ordered to stop. He would be grounded for his own safety. The idea would die with him. So he says nothing. He files the maneuver away, a theoretical answer to an impossible problem. He continues flying standard missions. He follows the rules. He survives, and he waits for the moment when survival will not be enough. March 1943. Wade is flying escort for a transport run over the Mediterranean. His flight consists of 4 P-40s strung out in a loose formation, scanning the sky. The transport lumbers below, heavy and slow. The mission is routine. The radio chatter is sparse. Then the call comes. Bandits high. 2 o'clock. Diving. Wade looks up and sees them. 2 Messerschmitts in a classic bounce, sunlight glinting off their canopies. They are fast, they are committed, and they have chosen Wade as their target. His wingman breaks left. The other 2 P-40s scatter. Wade is alone. The Messerschmitts split, one high, one low, a vertical pincer. Standard tactic. No escape. Wade's hand tightens on the stick. His mind goes quiet. The fear is there, but distant. He is calculating. Speed, angle, closure rate, time. The leader attacks first, diving from above. Wade sees the muzzle flashes. Tracers arc toward him, lazy and bright. He has perhaps 2 seconds. His training tells him to dive, to run, to use gravity to build speed. His instinct tells him the same. Every fiber of his body wants to push the stick forward and flee. Wade pulls back instead, hard. Full elevator. The stick comes into his lap. The nose pitches up. The horizon spins. The G-forces slam him into his seat. Blood drains from his head. His vision tunnels. The engine shrieks. The wings flex. The aircraft shudders on the edge of a stall. And the world rotates. The Messerschmitt flashes past, too fast, too committed. It cannot turn inside Wade's arc. It overshoots, nose high, energy bleeding as the pilot tries to reacquire. Wade rolls out, still slow, still vulnerable, but no longer in the line of fire. He has reversed the attack. The hunter has become the hunted. The second Messerschmitt is still diving. Wade has no speed. He cannot run. He pulls again. Same maneuver, same violence. The aircraft bucks and groans. The stall warning rattles. His vision grays. He holds the turn. The second Messerschmitt overshoots. Wade rolls wings level. Both attackers are ahead of him now, climbing, trying to regain position. Wade is slow. He is low, but he is alive. The Messerschmitts do not press the attack. They climb away, unwilling to descend again into the same trap. Wade lets them go. He has no fuel to pursue. He has no speed to catch them. He turns back toward the transport, his hands trembling on the stick, his heart hammering. He has just done something that should have killed him, and it worked. He lands in silence. His ground crew inspects the aircraft. No damage, no hits. Wade climbs out, legs unsteady. The crew chief asks if he saw action. Wade nods. He does not elaborate. He walks to his tent and sits on the edge of his cot. He pulls out his notebook. He sketches the encounter from memory, every angle, every second. He writes a single word at the bottom of the page, repeatable. But the squadron leader does not see it that way. Wade files a combat report. The leader reads it, frowns, and calls Wade into his tent. He asks Wade to explain the maneuver. Wade tries. He talks about turning radius, about energy exchange, about geometry. The leader listens with growing frustration. He tells Wade he got lucky. He tells him the maneuver is reckless. He tells him not to try it again. Doctrine exists for a reason. Pilots who deviate die. Wade says nothing. He salutes. He leaves. He knows what he experienced. He knows it was not luck. But he also knows he cannot convince anyone with words. He needs proof. He needs repetition. He needs other pilots to see it work. So he keeps flying. And he keeps waiting. April 1943. Another mission, another bounce. This time, Wade is ready. The moment the Messerschmitt commits, Wade pulls. The same violent turn, the same edge of stall arc, the same overshoot. This time, Wade has enough speed remaining to reverse again. He pulls into a climbing turn, tracking the Messerschmitt as it tries to escape. He fires. Tracers converge. The Messerschmitt trails smoke. Wade does not follow. He turns back to the formation. Another encounter. Another survival. May 1943. A third engagement. This time, Wade's wingman sees the maneuver. After they land, the wingman asks how Wade did it. Wade explains, slowly, carefully. He draws diagrams in the sand. He talks about timing, about when to initiate the pull. The wingman listens. The next mission, when they are attacked, the wingman tries it. He overshoots his first attempt, pulling too early, but he survives. On the next engagement, he gets the timing right. He forces an overshoot. He lives. Word spreads. Other pilots ask questions. Wade begins informal briefings, sketching on scraps of paper, demonstrating with his hands. Some pilots are skeptical. Others are desperate enough to try anything. Gradually, quietly, the maneuver begins to circulate through the squadron. It has no official name. Pilots call it Wade's turn. Some call it the last-ditch break. A few call it suicide with a chance. The squadron leader hears about it. He is furious. He calls Wade in again. He threatens to ground him. Wade listens calmly. Then he asks a simple question. How many pilots have survived using the maneuver? The leader does not have an answer. Wade provides one. 7 pilots, 8 engagements, no losses. The numbers speak. The leader dismisses him without further comment, but he does not issue the grounding order. June 1943. A larger engagement. A German fighter grouper bounces an entire Allied squadron, 12 P-40s against 20 Messerschmitts. The radio erupts with calls, pilots scatter, the sky fills with tracers and smoke. Wade pulls his maneuver twice, forcing overshoots, staying alive. Around him, other pilots do the same. The Luftwaffe, accustomed to easy kills, suddenly faces targets that refuse to cooperate. Attacks that should succeed fail. Firing solutions that should be simple evaporate. Confusion spreads. The engagement lasts 8 minutes. When it ends, 3 P-40s are lost, but 9 return. In previous engagements of similar size, losses averaged 50%. This time, 75% survive. The math is undeniable. Something has changed. After-action reports reach higher command. Intelligence officers take note. A flight instructor is sent to interview Wade. The instructor is skeptical. He asks Wade to demonstrate. Wade takes him up in a 2-seat trainer. He simulates the maneuver at altitude, slow and controlled. The instructor experiences the G's, the buffet of the stall, the violence of the pull. He lands pale and quiet. He files a report recommending further evaluation. A formal test program is initiated. Pilots volunteer to act as attackers and defenders. Wade teaches the maneuver in structured sessions. Engineers measure the turning radius, the G-loads, the speed loss. They confirm what Wade intuited. At specific speeds, the P-40 can outturn a Messerschmitt by a significant margin. The cost is speed, but the gain is survival. Doctrine is quietly updated. No official announcement, no public reversal. But the training syllabus is modified. New pilots are taught the defensive brake as a last resort tactic. Instructors emphasize timing and aircraft control. The maneuver is paired with situational awareness, ensuring pilots know when to use it and when to flee. It is not a replacement for sound tactics. It is an additional tool, a final option. By summer 1943, the maneuver has spread beyond Wade's squadron. Pilots across the Mediterranean theater are using it. Some modify it, adding rolls or vertical components. Others combine it with other tactics, using the brake to set up counterattacks. The Luftwaffe begins to adapt, becoming more cautious in their attacks, wary of overshooting. But caution slows them. It disrupts their aggression. And that alone saves lives. Wade's personal tally grows. By August, he is credited with 8 confirmed kills, not through aggression, through survival, through turning a defensive maneuver into an offensive opportunity. He is promoted. He is given a flight to command. He continues flying. He continues teaching. He does not seek recognition. He seeks results. By late 1943, Allied air superiority over the Mediterranean begins to shift. It is not due to one factor. New aircraft arrive, P-51 Mustangs, Spitfire Mark 9s. Pilot training improves. Logistics strengthen. But in the crucial months of mid-1943, when the balance hung on a knife's edge, one maneuver made a measurable difference. Statistical analysis conducted after the war shows that P-40 loss rates in the Mediterranean dropped by 18% between April and August 1943. Intelligence reports from captured Luftwaffe pilots mention Allied fighters using unexpected defensive tactics. German training manuals are updated to warn against overcommitting to attacks on P-40s. The ripple is subtle but real. More than numbers, the maneuver changes mindset. Allied pilots stop seeing themselves as victims. They stop accepting inferiority as inevitable. They learn that even outmatched aircraft can fight back, that physics and courage can compensate for performance gaps. Morale improves, confidence grows. Pilots fly more aggressively, knowing they have an option if an engagement turns bad. Wade himself becomes a quiet legend. He is not flashy. He does not seek fame, but pilots talk about him. They repeat stories of the small-town Texan who rewrote the rules. Some of the stories are exaggerated. Most are not. By the end of 1943, Wade has flown over 200 combat missions. He has 13 confirmed kills. He has never lost a wingman. In January 1944, Wade is transferred to a P-47 Thunderbolt squadron. The P-47 is a brute, a heavy fighter with power and armor. It does not need Wade's maneuver. It overpowers opponents. But Wade continues to fly with the same methodical precision. He continues to teach. He continues to think about energy and geometry. He is studying bomber escort tactics, looking for inefficiencies when his aircraft suffers engine failure on a routine flight. He crashes on takeoff. He is killed instantly. He is 28 years old. The news spreads quietly through the squadrons. Pilots who knew him attend a service in a dusty field outside Naples. There is no ceremony. A chaplain says a few words. A bugler plays taps. The war moves on. Wade's name appears in casualty lists, one more among thousands. There is no medal, no official commendation, no mention of the maneuver that saved dozens of lives. But the maneuver survives. It becomes part of the unofficial canon of fighter tactics, passed pilot to pilot, squadron to squadron. After the war, aviation historians begin documenting combat innovations. Wade's defensive brake is analyzed in technical journals. Test pilots recreate it in modern aircraft. It becomes a case study in energy management, a lesson in how to fight from disadvantage. In the 1950s, the maneuver is formalized in U.S. Air Force training as a high-G defensive brake. It is taught to jet pilots facing faster, missile-armed adversaries. The principles remain unchanged. Sacrifice speed to tighten radius, force an overshoot, reverse the geometry. The names of those who use it are recorded. The name of the man who invented it is mostly forgotten. Today, fighter pilots around the world learn variations of Wade's maneuver. It appears in training doctrine under different names, stripped of its origin story. The physics are well understood now. Computers model turning performance. Simulators replicate the G-forces. But the core insight remains Wade's, that survival sometimes requires doing the opposite of what instinct and training demand. Lance Wade's grave is in a military cemetery in Italy. Few visitors stop. There is no statue, no plaque explaining his contribution. The historical record is sparse, a handful of combat reports, a few paragraphs in unit histories, scattered mentions in memoirs of pilots who flew with him. The full scope of his impact was never documented because he died before the war ended, and because the men he saved scattered to other squadrons, other theaters, other lives. But physics does not forget. The equations he understood still govern flight. The principles he demonstrated still apply. In the archives, his sketches remain, precise diagrams of arcs and vectors, a quiet testament to a mind that saw past doctrine to deeper truth. War is often remembered through grand strategies and decisive battles, through generals and politicians, through the sweep of armies and the clash of fleets. But wars are also shaped by individual moments of clarity, by a pilot alone in a cockpit, calculating angles while death dives toward him, by the choice to trust logic over fear, to test an idea that everyone else dismissed. Wade did not seek to be a hero. He sought to solve a problem. He approached air combat the way he approached everything, methodically, patiently, with respect for the underlying mechanics. He did not invent courage. He did not discover some secret weapon. He simply looked at the same situation everyone else faced and asked a different question. Not how to run faster, but how to turn tighter. Not how to avoid the fight, but how to survive it. The lesson is not that one man changed the war. The lesson is that one man, thinking clearly under pressure, found a margin of advantage that others missed, and that margin, multiplied across hundreds of engagements, across dozens of pilots, became the difference between loss and survival, between despair and hope, between a doctrine that accepted defeat and a tactic that demanded something better. Wade's story is a reminder that innovation does not always come from laboratories or high commands. Sometimes it comes from the edge of a stall, from a pilot willing to trust his calculations more than his fear, from a quiet voice asking uncomfortable questions, from the stubborn belief that there must be another way, and the courage to prove it when no one else will. The skies over the Mediterranean are peaceful now. The wreckage has long been cleared. The air bases are silent or repurposed. The men who flew and fought there are nearly all gone. But the principles remain, encoded in training manuals, passed through generations of pilots who will never know the name of the small-town Texan who first pulled that desperate, defiant turn. Some legacies are carved in stone. Others are written in the physics of survival, in the unspoken knowledge that when the world compresses to seconds and tracers, there is always one more option, one more calculation, one more chance to turn inside the enemy's arc and prove that disadvantage is not destiny. That logic and courage, combined, can reshape the geometry of war itself. Wade did not live to see the end, but his idea did. And in the end, that is the only monument that matters.